Welcome to Being Humans, We're Better Together. My name is Ian Christopher Wendt. In this episode, I'd like to tease out and explore some of the key aspects of institutions and communities. In the other episodes this week, I've emphasized the distinctions between machine-like institutions, particularly states and corporations, versus communities based on interpersonal relationships. Today, I'd like to discuss how local communities are often nested within institutions, how we can recognize core aspects of these community-based institutions, and how we can engage in ways that make our participation more empowering and effectual. Understanding these principles can help us choose which communities and institutions to join, participate in, and support. These principles can also help you recognize what's going on and why people are saying and doing what they do, and perhaps help you make a difference in your community by focusing on the principles that matter to you, and even help your chosen institutions and communities actually become more vibrant, active, meaningful communities. First, what kinds of community-based institutions are we talking about? Many communities that you can join are nested within national or international institutions or organizations. These institutions usually have well-developed core principles, missions, leadership structures with central authorities, and ways of organizing and doing things in local chapters and communities. For example, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are local groups that are organized within regional councils under national scouting institutions around the world. Even more commonly, churches are local congregations of national or international church institutions with leaders, authoritative scriptures, creeds, mission organizations, layers of clergy hierarchies, and finally, local leaders, elders, and members who serve in the church. Some churches are highly centralized and uniform in their policies across congregations, and others are much more locally governed and varying in their practices. Service and advocacy organizations, from the Red Cross to Goodwill Industries to political action groups, also have local chapters nested within regional, national, and international institutional structures. Sororities and fraternities are local chapters of national organizations. Even sporting leagues and organizations can have institutional structures. What are the key aspects of community-based institutions? First, ideals or principles. These are the values, core missions, creeds, often based on authoritative documents, scriptures, bylaws, legal documents, platforms, etc. Second, leadership. The leaders of the institutional organization, the hierarchy or structure of leadership or governance, and the local community leadership. Third, the people, the members who join, attend, serve, and participate. In my experience, and I've spent years of my life participating in an array of community-based institutions, religious, civic, political, and economic. People join and participate in community-based institutions for a wide variety of reasons. We can also misunderstand how these different aspects, leadership, principles, and membership, can relate to one another in various organizations and communities. One of the most significant weaknesses of these organizations, in my experience, is the failure to recognize that the local groups need to be vibrant communities. When people focus too much on leadership or conflicts over core principles, then communities can weaken, fragment, and die. Let's consider each of these aspects in a little more detail. First, the ideals, core principles, mission statements, and documents that officially characterize the community. In a church, these would be the scriptures, core doctrines, or creeds. At a basic level, it is the way of living that characterizes discipleship in that institution or community. In competitive sporting leagues, the principles would be the rules of the game, as well as mastery of skills, competitive drive, hard work, teamwork, good sportsmanship. In a volunteer or service organization, the principles would be the core mission that the organization serves, as well as the rules of behavior of the leaders and members, legal rules for fundraising, and bylaws for institutional functioning and governance. All communities have ideals and norms that motivate, order, and regulate the activities of the institution and the members of the group, at least while they're participating. Institutions and communities can devote a lot of attention to these core principles and ideals. I've listened to so many speeches, talks, discussions, and sermons about the need to maintain our principles, to practice our principles better, and of course, the superiority of our principles over the people on the outside. I need to take a moment to introduce the principle of a hierarchy of values. A hierarchy of values. Everyone and every group values good principles. Even criminal conspiracies value loyalty, obedience, and effectiveness. In my experience, most of us value a similar range of principles. We often speak as if the people outside our institution or community or belief system value the opposite of what we value. I think this is pretty wrong. The difference is that people put their goals and principles in different order or different hierarchies. In mathematics, the order of operations is crucial to getting uniform solutions to equations. Human life in a community and society is way more complicated than most math equations, but the order of operations is still very important. Let's take 6 principles, for example. Following the rules and respecting authority. Hard work in service of mission. Love and kindness to others. Success in obtaining status, wealth, or power. Developing skills, knowledge, and expertise. Tolerance of different groups. It's not hard to imagine institutions, communities, groups, or individuals who would value most or all of these principles. They're good principles. But one group that places obedience to rules and hard work for the mission as their highest principles would be very different than a group that elevated becoming successful and gaining expert knowledge. They might value most of the same things, but the order or hierarchy in which they prioritize their principles and goals will shape their community. In my experience, most disagreements about core principles are actually disagreements about the hierarchy and order of priorities of values. In principle, most people agree that good principles are good. They just don't agree on how much time, energy, or resources to devote to these ideals or goals. Institutions can devote considerable attention to debating core principles. As the broader society changes, communities can break up over changing notions of ideals. We're watching this happen to a variety of churches and service organizations right now over changing ideals related to tolerance and gender. Hierarchies of values or well-organized mission statements or prioritized goals are very useful. Most of us have a pretty amorphous, changing, contextual range of responses to core principles. We want to get along with the people around us. When we find ourselves in an institutional setting, like school or work, we tend to follow the rules and go with the flow. We usually do not have a well-formed hierarchy of principles. Developing such a hierarchy of principles or values is one of the great benefits of participating in community-based institutions. The organization and our fellow members can give us a good idea of how our principles work or don't work when we put them in a certain order and pursue a particular set of goals. In choosing a community-based institution to join, support, or participate in, select one that most elevates the principles you feel are most important. And please remember that other communities value similar things, but prioritize them differently. The second important aspect of institutions and communities is leadership, where the people who govern the core of the institution, as well as those who lead the local community and the core of people who devote the most time and energy in service of forwarding the mission of the group. There's a structure common to most community-based institutions. First, they have central leadership, often older, often largely male, often with high attainments of expertise and success after the core mission of the institution. This, of course, can vary, but there are reasons why central leadership usually has these qualities. Older professional men and women who have dedicated years of study, work, and service to the institution rise to high central leadership. They are believers in the mission or goals of the organization. They're also usually insiders with years of commitment to the institution itself. Younger people, Newer members of the organization and part-timers with other priorities in their lives don't usually lead these organizations. This is also why many women who have sometimes in the past left organizational leadership to raise families, especially in previous generations, sometimes are not well represented in central leadership. And of course, some institutions and communities have had traditional norms that favored some groups over others. I'm not saying this is good or ideal. It's just how things have gone historically, and it explains the structure that you may find in a local organization. Next, below the central leadership, we have local communities, branches, or chapters. These are often led by one or two paid professionals. Think of priests, pastors, paid chapter presidents and officers, professional fundraisers, etc. Many organizations could not function without a core paid staff. Then, there is a group of 6 to 20 people who have prioritized the institution and community in their personal lives. They donate, serve, teach, and participate regularly. They attend the board meetings. They plan, organize, decorate, set up the chairs, cook most of the food, and stay afterwards to clean up the mess. Then there's the membership. We can divide the general membership into a couple of broad groups. The first group participates regularly and contributes their time and sometimes money to the organization's goals and activities. The second group, which is probably most members, sometimes comes to activities, especially special activities where food is served, but does not contribute service or very much time or money. Leadership is very important in centralized institutions. The Catholic Church and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are examples of centralized institutions with strong local communities. There are many others. Other organizations prefer less centralized or less institutionalized leadership. They prioritize local governance and are often much more responsive to core interest groups or participants who constitute the local leadership and board members. There are benefits and drawbacks to both forms of organization. Centralized institutions provide stable, uniform leadership, missions, and activities across the organization. They can also benefit from wide and deep wells of money and other resources. Local community branches in these centralized organizations can feel more stable and uniform, but they can be unresponsive to local concerns and slow to reform. Next, there are more locally focused leadership institutions. Localized leadership structures can be responsive, authentically local, and if they have charismatic local leaders, they can grow rapidly and be very exciting. But they have limited resources beyond their local community. And when the local leadership changes or comes into conflict or faces problems like corruption, the entire community can fragment or collapse. I've participated in both kinds of communities and institutions, centralized and community focused. Now, a more general note about leadership structures. People within organizations can often identify their institutions and their communities with their leaders. Donald Trump's successful rise within the Republican Party is the most striking example of this in the last 40 years. All political groups do this. Barack Obama was the avatar of the Democratic Party as well. But let's consider more community-based examples. I cannot tell you the number of times I have listened to community leaders praise themselves and their colleagues and leadership at meetings and events. They love to talk about themselves, their commitment to the principles and goals of the organization, their relationships with other leaders of the group, and the combined successes of the leaders and the organization in raising money and enacting programs toward their priorities. And the local members of the institution and community often do the same thing, praising the pastor, the president, the priest, the board of directors, etc., and equating their actions and ideas with those of the whole community and the group. It's not a terrible thing to do, but it would be a lot less self-serving and would strengthen the community more if leaders would talk about the actions of the members, and especially the young members, as a way of increasing cohesion, broadening participation, and reinvigorating the group with intergenerational growth and development. The third crucial aspect of community-based institutions is the people who belong to and participate in the community organization. This is obvious, but surprisingly often, the membership in our communities are actually the least recognized aspect of the community. They sometimes have little ability to shape the community. I'm often surprised at how strongly people can feel that their organizational connection rests on commitment to a particular doctrine or philosophy, or following a specific leader, rather than participating in a group of relationships in community. A religious congregation or community, a service organization community, or a local advocacy group can be great because it supports great principles. It can have charismatic expert leaders, but it only works if the people in the local community know each other, gather together, support one another, and work together to live the mission. The organization is only truly great or successful if it is iterated out in hundreds or thousands of human lives across healthy communities where people live the principles, volunteer, participate, serve, and change their lives as well as the lives of people around them. Another principle that we'll discuss much more over time is the natural forms of human resonance, or the ways that human beings resonate together. Human beings resonate emotionally and physically to a variety of common emotions, experiences, and activities. Eye contact. We need to see and be seen. Conversation and discussion. Taking turns listening, speaking, agreeing, contributing new and different thoughts, and getting to know each other. Next, hospitality. Eating and drinking together around the hearth. Taking turns giving and receiving and sharing food is absolutely central to community. Cooperation and competition. Whether in games, sports, service, or work, cooperation and competition bind us together and motivate us to excel. Laughter. We should do it more together. It's healthy and binding. Music and singing, as well as the dying art of dancing together. Few things move us emotionally and physically more naturally and powerfully than music. These and other natural forms of human resonance are not done by the centralized leadership or the high principles and mission statements. They are done by the community. These activities are the actions that cement, maintain, and strengthen relationships, relational bonds, and community cohesion. In the age of smartphones and social media, many people thought the world would be revolutionized by people tapping their phones with their thumbs. It usually doesn't work that way. The communications we participate in on our phones can be useful, even meaningful, but they are limited if they're not connected to interactions in real life. They don't accomplish the same results. They don't feel as fulfilling or meaningful. They don't bind us together in relationships and communities to the same degree. It only takes half a second to click like on a post. And what do 50 likes get you? I promise you, it's better, more meaningful, more joyful to make eye contact with 50 people and participate together in an activity that brings your goals into real life in the world. COVID confronted and challenged the way we relate to communities. Can you still have community when all you have are the ideals and the leaders and the people are only remote or online? I think the variety of experiences we had during and since the pandemic are complex. To some degree, we've found ways to meet and cooperate virtually. But it is hard to argue that our communities have not suffered a great deal of loss during and after COVID, from churches to schools to scout troops. There are a lot of different experiences with communities, organizations, and institutions. People have differing relationships with their communities and social groups. They may be largely tied to the people, or they may primarily identify with the ideals. They may have close relationships with leadership, or maybe they feel alienated from the leadership but feel connected to the members. So people can connect to their communities in lots of different ways, and so can you. I hope we can recognize the importance of principles, leadership, and membership participation in our communities and institutions. I particularly hope this moves us to join communities, rejoin communities, participate, develop our principles, connect, serve, improve our lives and all of the lives we can touch with our dedication and kindness. If this message moves you, please act. Connect with your people, share personally with them, talk, laugh, play, work together. And please comment, like, subscribe, and join our community. Amen, amen. This is the way of being humans together.